welcome to another musical home tip of the week. Today I'm going to show you the differences between singing classical music and the difference between Broadway music. The cool thing about those two genres is that they both are very similar, and yet when you break it down into the elements of singing either one, they're pretty different. So the first example that I'm going to sing for you is the classical example from Handel's Messiah. It's called Come Unto Him. So that was our example of Come Unto Him. In that example, you'll notice that I have to sing, way up high and all that kind of stuff. So I have to have that good breath support. Now in singing Broadway music, you also have to have good breath support from your diaphragm. They teach you in acting school that you have to use your diaphragm to project, even speaking. So it's the same thing with singing. But what you'll notice in the classical song is that I had a very open tone, round tones, as they say in Singing in the Rain. So that means that on the inside of your mouth, your soft palate is raised way up high, and you can think of, if you've ever been in a large cathedral, the roof has this really high arch. You want your soft palate to be the same way when you're singing classical music. The sound when I'm singing classical music is a little bit farther back in my throat, I guess, in my mouth, than it is in Broadway music. In a few minutes you'll see the difference between the two. Another thing about singing classical music is we try to have very pure vowel sounds. So the vowels are the dominant parts of our classical music singing. A lot of people like to put an emphasis when they're giving singing lessons on singing something in Italian. And that's because Italians, in the language, they have very, very pure vowels. A, E, O, U. So that makes it very easy to open up, have that soft palate raised on the inside. So to raise your soft palate for singing classical music, a good way to start is by doing some of the sighs that we've learned in our other lessons, hoo, doing on a hoo sound, or by yawning. Yawning automatically opens up this area back here so that it's a very nice round shape, and it also lifts up that soft palate. So those are a few things about singing classical music. So for an example of Broadway music, I'm going to sing a little excerpt from Light in the Piazza. I don't see a miracle shining from the sky. I'm no good at statues and stories I try. That's not what I think about, and that's not what I see. I know what the sunlight can be. The light in the piazza. It's tiny, sweet, and then it grows, and then it fills the air. Okay, so a few things to notice in the difference between that Broadway song and our classical piece was it's not quite as open sounding, and it's also, it's got more of a harsh sort of sound to it. And what I mean by this is there's a sound, when we sing Broadway music, we want to look for something, a sound that is in front of us. So when we sing Broadway, we don't focus as much on the vowels, we focus a lot on the consonants. So it's tiny, sweet, and then it grows, and then putting it in the front of my face. Now that's a really hard concept for beginning singers to understand. But it's like if you have a stuffy nose, or you're holding your nose to go swimming in a pool. That's kind of where the pressure should be for that forward voice when you're singing. That forward voice also helps you when you're singing those high notes in classical, Broadway, any style. So with your Broadway style, we want to focus on speech. So the very beginning part of that, I don't see a miracle shining from the sky. That's very different than I would sing it if I was singing it in classical. So here's the classical version of a Broadway song. I don't see a miracle shining from the sky. Can you hear the difference? This classical is sort of a sound that's farther back in here, and the Broadway is a little bit more forward. So there are a couple things to keep in mind. When you're singing Broadway, you want to have a speech quality. So you want to sing as if you're telling a story. So when we tell stories, we emphasize different parts. We have a lot of dynamics, which means being soft and loud in different parts. Even as we speak, we have different parts where we halt. Where normally, if it's an operatic song or something like that, it might be a little bit more lyrical. So when singing Broadway, think of how you speak. Some parts are going to be loud, some parts are going to be soft, some are going to have more emphasis. So you might put more emphasis on a T than you would on another letter, depending on what your word is. So, those are just a few things to keep in mind when you're singing classical and when you're singing Broadway. So, good luck. I hope this tip was helpful to you.